本节目由津津乐道制作播出。
Hello everyone, this is a special podcast program, A Journey to the UK, jointly produced by the Dao Podcast, the British Council General in Guangzhou, and the Himalaya FM. We will discuss and share knowledge and experience about culture, tourism, and education in the UK. Without further ado, let's just get started. I'm Summer, one of the hosts of the Dao Podcast. And today, we also have Sarah, British Council General in Guangzhou. Yeah, I heard that you are learning Chinese now.
That's right.
Would you like to say hi to the audience in Chinese?
大家好，我是蒙氏人，我是英国驻广州的总领事。你好，
Wow.
你们好。
Wow, your Chinese is pretty good. Could you briefly introduce yourself and your main responsibility also in Chinese?
也在中文好，所以我是英国驻广州的总领事。我在广州，在华南代表英国政府。
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I just wanted to say in English it's okay.
I'm more than happy to try and do it in Chinese. It's good practice for me. Yeah, so I'm the Consul General for the UK in Guangzhou. We cover 6 provinces in South China here. And I represent the UK across all of the work that we do here in South China.
Oh, great. How long have you been in Guangzhou?
So I only arrived 3 months ago. I'm very new to the city.
Oh, very new, yeah. And then how's your feeling?
It's been great so far. I mean, I'm really lucky. I have a really great team here at the consulate. Lots of colleagues who can help me to understand China, who can help me to understand Guangzhou and Guangdong. Everybody's been really friendly. My family have settled in really quickly, and it's really hard not to love Guangzhou. Although I'm not used to the weather yet. It's really hot. It's really difficult for me. I'm looking forward to winter.
I think there's a lot of delicious food in Guangzhou. Yeah, I hope you can enjoy it. Yeah.
There really is. I love all of the food so far, except that a friend made me try chicken feet. And I have to say, not my favorite.
Chicken feet is delicious, but I understand because a lot of foreigner friends, they don't like it either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very unusual food for the UK. So maybe I'll try it again one day, but not for a while.
Yeah. Today, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to have this conversation with Sarah because I can share a little more about my story with the UK. It is a coincidence that I was originally supposed to have a business trip to the UK for cultural exchange in advertising industry in 2020. And we have done a lot of preparation for that because I think the UK has a long history and splendid culture. So at that time, I even reserved 15 days on annual leave. I want to have a deep exploration of the UK. However, it is finally cancelled due to some unexpected reason. So today, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. Maybe it would be another new alternative way to engage in cultural exchange.
I'm sorry your trip was cancelled, but I hope that you get to do it at some point in the future. Have you still got it planned?
Yeah.
Great.
I will make my trip in the UK very soon. Today, I'm very glad to talk with you to get more information and spark my inspirations. Because actually, I don't like package tours. I prefer independent tours. And I definitely want to be deeply involved in the local experience. So Sarah, from the perspective of local people in the UK, what are some very special tourism or cultural experience that you will highly recommend it?
I get asked this really often, and I love answering the question, but it's also a really hard question to answer. The UK is really small, but it has so much to offer to tourists, and it's really accessible to tourists, even if you're traveling independently and not as part of a tour group. So I think it's great. There's loads of different things that you can do in the UK. I mean, I'd probably start by talking about like some of the things that lots of people know about. So whether that's football or other sporting activities or outdoor activities or going to visit some of the historic sites that are in the UK, going to see some museums, and then of course food and drink. I think it's my favorite thing in Guangzhou is to go out and experience the food and drink. And I think for lots of people going to the UK, it's also one of the highlights of their time there. Where would you like to start?
You have just mentioned the football, yeah. when it comes to British football. I think most people in China, especially female, I think we have to mention David Beckham. Yeah, he is so handsome.
It's so funny you mentioned that because when I was growing up, David Beckham was this huge superstar. And I remember watching him play for England and play for Manchester United, and we all knew his name. But now, of course, he's been retired for a long time. In terms of football in the UK, he's not necessarily what people would talk about, but he's still a superstar. I find it really interesting, actually, the number of people who travel to the UK and go to see a football match. It's really high. And I think that's because, football started in the UK. It's where the game originally came from. We have great teams, including now a brilliant women's team who just got to the semi-finals of the Women's World Cup. So that's a really good thing, I think. And football's much more accessible to people than it used to be. Much easier to go and see a match, even if you're not somebody who wants to go and play a dirty field on a Sunday afternoon.
Do you play football in your spare time?
Absolutely not. No, I'm not a football player. I'm trying to encourage my daughter to play football because I think it's really good to play. I like watching though, and lots of British people really like watching football, even if they don't like playing. So ever since I was a teenager, I used to go and watch football matches. And there's something about the atmosphere when you're in the crowd and you can feel the passion people have for the game. So it's a good cultural experience, even if you're not a big fan.
I think it's very interesting because I thought football was invented in China because China has played a game of kickball, 蹴鞠, for over 2,000 years. But the modern rules that we know now were set up in England. Yeah, so I think it's very interesting. Yeah,
I didn't know that about China.
Really?
That's really interesting that there's a similar game here. It's one of those sports that was kind of invented everywhere, and it was just that it was in England that the game was systematized and the rules were developed for the modern game. But that's very interesting about China.
As a traveler in the UK, if you are interested in British football, as Sarah just mentioned, we can try to buy a ticket to watch the football contest on site. But expect that, I guess we still have another ways. Maybe we can also choose to visit a football museum at Old Trafford, have a coffee at Red Coffee, checked-in hotel football. More detailed things can be found on the website and the WeChat of UK National Tourism Authority.
Absolutely.
I have heard that because it is said that if you haven't been to Britain, the pub culture is quite a big part of life in the UK. I just have one question. Do you guys really go to the pub every day?
No. Well, maybe some people go to the pub every day. I don't go to the pub every day. But I do think that you're right, that pubs are really at the heart of British society. The word pub actually comes from the term public house, which meant a kind of meeting place. And the idea was that when people were on the road, they had a living room that they could spend time in, somewhere that felt kind of homely and comfortable. It wasn't about going to eat or going to drink. It was about going to relax and spend time and meet people, meet friends. And I think that's the strand of pub culture, which has continued to the present day. It is quite common, I would say, in Britain. For example, in London, at about 6 o'clock, when people finish work, the pubs get really busy. Colleagues will go and have a drink together and complain about their day, share their stresses, just relax a little bit sometimes before going home. Not every night, but every night the pubs are busy because people often do that. But now it's very easy. You can go to pubs all over. They have very different atmospheres depending on the pub. They might be showing sports. They might be serving really nice food. They might just be for kind of sitting around drinking beer.
My friend highly recommended me to have a try. I remember he recommended me to try the cider and ale, right? The reason is most the beer in the world are lager, but the ale, he told me, is the British beer, which is the oldest beer. The taste will be a little bit bitter, but he think I should have a try.
You should definitely have a try. I'm the wrong person to talk to about this. I'm not a big fan of British beer, or at least very traditional British beer. But you're right. You should definitely try it because it's very distinctive. I think For people who prefer slightly sweeter taste, cider is a very good option because it comes from apples, or you can get modern ones with like pear or peach, and that's really good. But I prefer the kind of more modern beers. Like there's a famous Scottish brewery called Brewdog, which I think sells some of their beers in China. And those are more kind of modern British beers for people who want something in between a lager and a beer, a bit more of a gentle introduction to the more bitter taste. Frank gives good recommendation.
Yeah, I will try the cider and ale, And who will go to the pub?
I would say most people in the UK go to the pub. It doesn't really matter. Lots of pubs let children go. You can go as a family. Not all pubs will. It depends on the pub. But most adults at some point will go to a pub in the UK. You can drink soft drinks. You can eat. You can drink alcoholic drinks. You can stay till late at night. You can go in the middle of the day. They're very kind of flexible types of places with very many different uses. Pubs in China, are they the same?
No, I don't think the same.
How so?
Yeah, because I think for Chinese people, usually we don't have time to go to the pub every day because my friends told me they just almost go to the pub every single day. I was so surprised. I think, you guys, you have so many time. Have you heard of the 996?
I have heard of the phenomenon, yes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure, so people don't have time to go to the pub every day. Usually in China, I think the TGIF, the Friday night, or the Saturday or the Sunday, we will go there, but not so frequently as British people do.
The weekend is definitely the busiest time in Britain as well. And now in the UK, because lots of people work from home, sometimes even in pubs, you see people sitting on their laptops typing and drinking coffee in the pubs. So lots of different options.
And I noticed that there are another difference between the UK and the Chinese pub. Because in China, I think we will order the bill or the food, and there are some waiter or waitress, they can provide the service. And we will check the bill, after we finish all the things. But I think in the UK, it is quite different, right?
Definitely in traditional pubs. These days we're a bit more similar because some pubs will have online apps that you can order through. So that is more similar to China. But generally speaking, in a traditional pub, you go up to the bar and you order at the bar and you pay as for everything as you order it. This is the traditional method. And it goes back to that idea of the pub as your living room. So you're not having somebody kind of constantly pressuring you to buy more. They're not coming over and saying, are you ready? Do you want to leave? Do you want the bill? Is it time to go? Can you buy more? Pay more. Instead, you go up to the bar when you're ready. You might have a little chat with the person working behind the bar, get the drink that you want. Sometimes actually in pubs, if you're not sure what kind of beer you want, they'll let you try a little bit. So say to them like, oh, can I try some of these different beers? It's a kind of more self-service type of mentality. But in lots of ways, it makes it more relaxed.
My friend told me that if you just go there with your friends, you should go to the bar and then you should pay it for first round, then the second round. But in China, we will definitely not do this. I think it's very special.
It can get a bit complicated if you're 8 people. I mean, you need to drink 8 drinks for it to be fair. You have to work on the basis that you're going to see these people again and they can buy the first round next time.
So I think it is quite interesting. Then could you recommend some pubs that we should experience in the UK? Yeah, because you have mentioned there's so many pubs.
There's so many. You know what? My best recommendation is go somewhere, walk around and just look in the pub windows and see which one appeals to you, which one feels the best. There is one in London called Ye Olde Cheshire Cheese, which is a very unusual pub name, but it's really beautiful. It's in the old legal quarter and it has all these kind of cute little nooks and crannies and it feels very atmospheric. So I would recommend that. But I'd also recommend there's a really great magazine and website in the UK called Time Out. And it's a really great place to look for bar and restaurant recommendations. So I'd suggest that people go and have a look at that, depending on where they are in the UK, find what pubs are recommended in that place, because there's just too many to count. Every tiny little village has its own pub.
Okay, just try to find one that best fits you.
Exactly. And for people who are traveling independently in the UK, I think there's something really nice about going to places that are off the beaten track as well. Places that are further away from the big cities. And then there's maybe only 3 pubs to choose from, so you can go to all of them.
Just walk in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, great suggestions. Then you have also mentioned some outdoor activities and festivals. Yeah, so could you introduce it?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, lots of people go to the UK and they want to watch football, but there's actually lots of other sporting events and other kinds of big events in the UK. One of my favorite is every summer the Wimbledon Tennis Championship, which is one of the world's most famous tennis tournaments. It can be quite hard to get tickets for.
Yeah.
And this is a
Very
bit
difficult.
of a problem. It's really difficult. Have you tried?
My friend told me, it is very difficult to get tickets.
Yeah.
So I know that.
It's a very British thing to do. But what you can do is get up very early in the morning and go and queue and wait in line to get tickets for Wimbledon. And for lots of people, this seems like a crazy thing to do. But actually, it is a very nice atmosphere when you go and you stand in the queue and then you get into the grounds and you can walk around and really experience the whole feel of the tennis championship. But if you don't fancy that, there's things like the British Grand Prix. There's the Royal Ascot, which I'm sure lots of people have heard about because the hats are always so beautiful and the fashion at Royal Ascot.
Everyone there was well dressed and all the females got a hat.
Exactly. But then, of course, you have to go shopping before you go to buy the big hats. So it's a time-consuming thing. I mean, I would also say, though, if people like outdoors activities, there's a lot more kind of rustic activities that you can do. So one really popular thing is the Glastonbury Music Festival, which happens every year. And that's a kind of rock and pop outdoor music festival. It's super popular. It gets really muddy. Everyone camps. I've never done it, but my brothers are really... So that's a really good thing to do. There's the Edinburgh International Festival, which is a performing arts festival. Yeah. So you can go and watch loads of plays and comedy and things like that. I've never been, but it's something I've wanted to do for years. So maybe next time I'm in the UK, I'll go to that.
Okay.
What would be top of your list if you were in the UK for a festival?
Due to my work in marketing, I particularly prefer creative festivals. I know LDF, a London Design Festival. It is over 20 years old, and it is really very famous in industry.
Yeah, I think that would be an amazing experience to go for. It's coming up quite soon, right?
Yeah. It usually takes place in September. This year, on September 16th to September the 24th. And actually, we also have Shanghai Design Festival in Shanghai. So if I have the chance, I definitely want to go there. Because I know there's a lot of workshop and a lot of exhibitions. I will have the chance to communicate with the people with creativity. It will be really cool.
That sounds great. And you are making my point perfectly that the UK has something to offer for everybody.
Yeah.
There's so many different options. If you love the Beatles or you love railways or you love old castles, there's probably a festival for that as well.
Great. Anytime you come to the UK, you can match festivals or outdoor activities held at different time periods. Just feel free to participate based on your interests. Then we would like to talk about the unique culture.
Sounds good.
I have mentioned that I have reserved 15 days for my trip in the UK 3 years ago. Can you guess anything I want to do? Or any place I must want to go?
Oh, good question. I feel like everybody who goes to the UK wants to go to a castle and see the history of the country.
Yes. Do you know Zheizhou?
Oh, I've heard of, but this is where my Chinese cultural knowledge is a bit more limited.
Yeah, he is a very popular Chinese singer and an idol for many people in China, including me. Yeah, he's really a big star. And he got married to Selby Abbey in the UK. So we certainly realize there's a lot of castles and church in the UK. It is so romantic. Could Sarah just recommend some local, distinctive or stylish or very special castles for us?
You're right. There's so many in the UK. This is such a difficult question. What are the ones that you have in your mind? I'm sure there's some that are very famous in China. So tell me what the ones that are famous here are, and I'll tell you which ones you're missing.
I think Windsor Castle. This is very famous.
Absolutely. The royal family still live there part of the time. So you can go and visit it, but you can't see the whole thing because they still use it as their private residence at times. I think Windsor Castle is really famous. The thing I would say about castles is in the UK, we have lots of different names to refer to these really grand buildings. So we have castles, but we also have abbeys, which tend to be older religious things, and then palaces and houses. And some of the houses are like palaces themselves. So it's really kind of, don't be put off if something is called a house or a palace, because it might be just as grand as the castles. Edinburgh Castle is obviously also really famous, and it's on a hill in Edinburgh. So it's a very striking building. I would personally recommend, because I remember going there with my grandfather when I was a little girl, Hampton Court Palace, which is just outside of London, or in London, in West London. And it's this beautiful Tudor palace. And it goes back to the time of Henry VIII. So it's got this really long history and beautiful manicured gardens. It's very easy to get to if you're in London, which is a big advantage. And it has these like old kitchens and stuff. So you can really see how the place used to work. It also has something called a real tennis court. So if you like Wimbledon and you like going to see tennis, you can also see this other version of tennis at Hampton Court Palace, and it's a really weird sport. It's like played inside a room with these kind of, my husband plays it, and every time he describes it, I'm like, this is the weirdest sport in the history of the world. It's like a combination of kind of tennis and squash and chess, and you hit the ball in certain places and it bounces off the walls and bounces off the ceilings, and you still get to play. And you get extra points in Hampton Court Palace if you play there. And you can book a lesson there, actually, as a non-member. But you get extra points if the ball hits the portrait of Henry VIII, which is a really bizarre system. So you just get lots of different aspects of English culture and history if you go there. There's also Warwick Castle, Cardiff Castle. There's Highclere, which is where Downton Abbey was filmed. So I'm sure lots of your listeners are aware of that one, would recognize it.
Yeah, we want to just go there. But I noticed it is not very convenient to get there, right?
Lots of these castles and palaces can be out in the countryside because they were often built on these big country estates that families would own in England. You can often do day trips from somewhere like London, get a coach that will take you to somewhere, or public transport. It's also really easy to rent a car in the UK. So if you're happy to drive, then you can do that, although the roads are quite busy. The other one, which is quite difficult to get to, that I'd recommend is Corfe Castle. So a little bit like Stonehenge, it's kind of a ruin, but it's not ancient, and it's right on top of a hill. And you get really lovely views of the English countryside if you go there. And just one final thing on castles and palaces. So most of the castles and palaces that you can visit in the UK, they're managed by one of two organisations, either the National Trust or English Heritage. And they both have really good apps and websites. And so you can look through, and if you're going to a certain part of the country, you can see what castles, what palaces they've got there. They also have lots of details about walks and hikes and things like that you can do, what the parking's like, how to get there. So those two organizations manage all of these properties, and they make it really easy for you to work out where you want to go, what you want to see, how you're going to do it when you get there, so long as you can, read the English.
Great. And another question, is this all open to public? Do we have to make some reservation before we go there, or we just can walk in?
It varies a little bit. Most of them are open to the public. The National Trust and English Heritage ones, mostly open to the public, mostly open most days, but they all will tell you on the website.
Yeah.
Some, like Windsor Castle, but also Buckingham Palace in London, you can go, but certainly Buckingham Palace, you have to book in advance and make the reservation in advance to go. But mostly you just go, you pay the fee on the gate and you can go in. There's no need to book in advance.
Great. And another thing on my list, because I want to experience the authentic English afternoon tea. Yeah, because it is sad that when the clock strikes 5, everything stops for tea. Is that still this way?
No, not really. I think in the way that yam cha is very traditional here in Guangzhou, afternoon tea is very traditional in the UK, but it doesn't mean we all do it every day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But it is still something that people really enjoy, and particularly groups of friends or maybe a mother and daughter would often go out for tea as a kind of special occasion or a treat type of thing. Can you experience afternoon tea in China? Are there places where you've been to have this kind of tea?
Yeah, because I think British afternoon tea is very popular in China, and there are a lot of hotel and restaurant and they offers the British afternoon tea. And I have experience with my friends. At that time, I think we are very casual and we don't pay attention to a lot of things. Then I just think maybe we have to do something wrong because usually it have 3 layer, different things. I think at that time, we just pick up the things which we think is delicious, randomly.
That's probably a much smarter way of doing it.
But my friend in the UK told me, this is wrong. Yeah, so Sarah, could you tell us the right order and the manner?
Firstly, let me say, if you go and have afternoon tea in Britain, nobody is going to come and police you and tell you you're doing it wrong. You can do what you want. But there is a kind of normal way of eating it. And the most important thing to know with afternoon tea is that you start at the bottom and work up. So normally the bottom layer in a tea, I don't actually know what those things are called, the tea plate stack thing. The bottom layer will be salty food, savory food, sandwiches or pastries or something like that. Yeah. And then they will get sweeter as they go up. Now, if you really like the sweet stuff, you'll be really full by the time you get to the top. So maybe start with the sweet stuff is fine. But traditionally, you start at the bottom with the sandwiches and work your way up. And these days in the UK, there's lots of different takes on afternoon tea, lots of different ways of doing it. So sometimes you won't even get the plates on top of each other. You'll just get one big tray, and then it's very confusing. You don't know what to do. So you can ask somebody.
Yeah, and I think there's scone. This is very traditional British food. Yeah, you can just add the jam and the cream.
That's right.
Yeah, I think this one is perfect. I like this one very much. Yeah.
And it's a very controversial topic in a part of the UK as to whether you add your jam first or your cream first. So if you are, I can never remember which way round it is, but the cream comes from southwest England, Devon and Cornwall, traditionally. And in one of those counties, which is kind of like a province, you add the jam first. And in one of those counties, you add the cream first, and then you put the jam on top. And people feel very passionate about which way round you add the jam and the cream. So it doesn't matter, you can choose. But people will be interested to know whether you add your jam first or your cream first to the scone.
Okay. So another question, put milk first or tea first?
I don't actually know which is supposed to be. I always put my tea first and then the milk, because then you can see how much milk you've added.
Okay.
Or you can just do it the Chinese way and not add milk. That's also acceptable.
So it just depends on yourself.
Personal taste, I would say.
Okay. So we can just do it as we like. So don't judge this is right or this is wrong. Just be relaxed.
I think that's really important. And there is a perception that people in the UK have very strict rules about things. Traditionally, some of that is true. But generally now, so long as you're kind of polite and respectful, you can put your milk or your tea in whichever way you want. We're very relaxed these days.
Well, it's very interesting. Now, when is the best time for the British afternoon tea now?
The best time is in what time of day?
Yeah.
Well, it's normally only served in the afternoon. So between, say, 3 and 5, I think. But you have to, my personal advice would be, it sounds like, oh, it's just tea and scone. It's fine. I'll still have space. It's very filling. Afternoon tea, now it's like a whole meal, and yet you have it kind of 2 hours after lunch and maybe 2 hours before your dinner. So you need to plan your other meals around it. So if you're going, say, to the theatre to watch a musical or something, that would be my advice. Go for afternoon tea before and then have dinner after the theatre has finished and have a really late dinner that day. But you need to plan your other meals because otherwise you're wasting your money and your hunger on those meals.
Very great suggestions. How much will it cost usually?
Oh, it varies a lot. So if you went to a little tea rooms somewhere in a small town, you might pay 10 or 15 pounds, which is about 100 to 150 RMB. But in a very expensive London hotel, it might be £40 or £50 to have afternoon tea per person. So it really varies. You can do it cheaply or quite expensive.
Great. Could you recommend some for me? A special one.
Special ones. Okay, so...
Special one or the untypical one or the ones that I cannot miss.
Okay. Well, I think there's loads. I would say again, it's worth going to the Time Out magazine because they have really good recommendations for things like this. Obviously, you can go to any really nice 5-star hotel and almost all of them will serve a good afternoon tea. So somewhere like the Ritz or the Savoy would serve a really good afternoon tea. Also, some of the really nice department stores like Fortnum & Mason, which is a really famous one for food and drink. So they do a really good afternoon tea, as I understand it. And then traditional places like the Pump Room in Bath, or there's like a place, I've never been there, called Betty's Tea Room in Yorkshire, which is very famous. But I think it's also worth being aware that there's lots of kind of different ones now as well. So in London, there's one, I think it's called Pret-a-Porter, and it's a fashion-themed afternoon tea. It's in a hotel, the Berkeley Hotel, but it's themed around like high-end fashion. So everything's shaped like handbags and stuff. Wow. And then there's a bus you see all the time going around London, and it's called the Bee Bakery bus. And it's afternoon tea, but you sit on a red bus and you do a tour of London at the same time. So that's really popular. Yeah, you see it every time you're walking around. And the Science Museum has one that's really great for kids where like the sandwiches are cut in the shape of rockets and stuff. And there's a wizard-themed one as well. So if you've got kids who really like Harry Potter, you can go, and it's called Cutter and Squidge. They mix potions in front of you and do things like that. So you know, you can do it in a really modern, new way, or you can have a really traditional elegant kind of in a 5-star hotel type of tea.
Oh, thanks. There's too many choices.
I know. There's too many. This is why you need to kind of work out what you want and then look for the recommendations online.
And the last thing on my list is that I would like to visit some unique museum in the UK, because I think in UK there are around 1,700 museums in the UK.
You have more numbers to hand than I do. That's amazing.
And in London, I think there's over 200 museums. So it is called the museum capital. It's too many. So could Sarah recommend some, maybe I think unique, even small or independent museum or galleries in the UK?
You're right. There's so many. It's so hard to recommend because it depends so much what people like, right? And the good thing about the UK is that lots of museums are free.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't need to book. You can just walk in, and if you don't like it, leave again. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. So you can do lots of them that are close together. One of my personal favorites is in Portsmouth in the south of the UK. There's a few different kind of museums on ships there. But my favorite is back when I was a kid in the early 90s, I think, they managed to pull an old Tudor, so like 15th century warship up from the bottom of the English Channel. It's called the Mary Rose, and it was Henry VIII's flagship. And they pulled it up, and you can go and see it in this like massive hangar in Portsmouth. And it's being constantly sprayed with water to keep it preserved because it's like it was preserved on the bottom of the seabed. But that's a really amazing thing if you like ships and maritime history. And Portsmouth has loads of museums about maritime history. And then I would say in London, the art galleries are incredible. So the Tate Modern and the National Gallery would be the two I'd recommend because they're really close together. You go to the National Gallery, see the old stuff, and then you can cross the river, have lunch somewhere on the South Bank, and then go to the Tate Modern, which is a kind of modern art gallery. And it's got this amazing, huge entrance hall where like kids spend their time running around, but it's really quite stunning. It's in an old factory.
Thank you so much for Sarah's recommendation, because I got so many choices, and some of the things you mentioned I haven't known before. So I think I still have a lot of homework to do.
Happy to provide any more advice that you need. I think you'll have a brilliant time when you make it to the UK.
Thanks for hearing. This is the first episode. The second episode will coming soon. And we're going to talk more about the UK education, shopping, food, and the summary of the top things in the UK in the coming second episode. so don't miss it.
感谢您收听本期节目。本期播客节目由津津乐道制作播出。你也可以在我们的官网 dao.fm 找到我们的更多内容作品。如果您喜欢我们的节目，欢迎在微信、微博、朋友圈等社交媒体转发分享。您的分享对我们而言十分重要。如果您希望与我们互动，可以关注我们的微信公众号津津乐道播客，天津的津，欢乐的乐，道路的道。在关注后按提示操作即可加入我们的听友社群。